Well, thank you everybody for joining us. Got all the coaches here from the Wake Forest baseball team, Evan Wise and Coach Strahm and Kristen Nicholson, the biomechanist. And we're going to talk about the Wake Forest pitching lab, our evaluation process, how the lab came to be, how we use some of the data, and with our arm care coach and strength coach. And hopefully we get a lot of valuable information out of that and share it with your baseball pitching enthusiast friends. So let's start off with Coach Walter. If you could jump in a little bit and talk about how the idea of the lab came to be and how you guys built the thing, how long it took to get us to where we are today.
Yeah, thanks, Jefferson. About 4 years ago, Dr. Michael Freehill and I sat down for dinner one night and came up with a plan to make Wake Forest University, Wake Forest Baptist, and the city of Winston-Salem the pitching epicenter of the world. And we wanted pitching knowledge to be generated from here that would help development and safety of pitchers for years to come. And that's how this lab was born. And Dr. Freehill said the first thing and the most important thing in this lab is the biomechanist, Kristen Nicholson's position. Without that biomechanist, that this lab was basically useless, that baseball coaches couldn't understand the type of data that something like this produces. So that's when he started to talk about these infrared cameras and the force plates and obviously the ball tracking device. And we came up. Originally, this was supposed to be a for-profit business, so we talked to some investors about investing in this. And then when Dr. Freehill left for the University of Michigan and the Detroit Tigers, that's when we went. Jeff Strahm introduced me to Greg Collins, who obviously had sports medicine at Wake Forest, who led us to Dr. Komen. And then we went to Wake Baptist for a partnership with them. And that's when the lab was really born then, that partnership between Wake Athletics and Wake Baptist, both financially and otherwise, led to this lab. And Wake Baptist has hired Kristen Nicholson. And then we've got our staff, John Hendricks and Evan Wise, Mark Seaver, Jeff Strahm on our end, for the pitching part of things. So we built, with our player development center was going up about 2 years ago. We added the pitching lab part of it, thanks in part to that financial commitment from the hospital and in part from fundraising dollars from our donors. And again, we've got the lab, and we've got about $240,000 worth of cameras in there, I suppose. Maybe Kristen can get us the exact number. We've got maybe another $60,000 or $70,000 in force plates, TrackMan, Rapsodo, things like that. So I think all in, we're probably upwards north of $350,000 of technology, plus the cost of the space. And it's second to none. And what we've learned, I think, more than anything through this lab and through Kristen is that, the way you move as an athlete is really more important than anything else. And if you're not moving properly, then you're not going to stay healthy and you're not going to develop the way that you should. So I think what we've learned, and I'll let the experts talk more on that, but I think really what we've learned more than anything is that movement pattern is first and foremost the priority.
And so how long did it take to go from concept to, shovels in the ground, building the space, to be able to open January of 2019. So we've been fully operational for a year-ish. Well, at least open for a year, fully operational for, since last July.
We've been open for about 18 months. I mean, Kristen came on board September 1st of 2 falls ago. And then we didn't really have the lab open till right at the end of our fall baseball season. So I'd say right around October 20th or so is when we really captured our first person in the lab. And then we had the official groundbreaking, as you know, with Wake Baptist and the media. That January is when we had the official opening. But we had a soft opening with our players only in October, where Kristen captured those guys right at the end of our fall baseball season. And if I think I'm right when I say it's right around October 20th-ish is when we had that first capture. So from conception to open was about 2.5 years. And then from when shovel in the ground to everything being up was really about a year in time from shovel in the ground to finished product.
That's really fast. That's a really quick turnaround for opening that kind of space. That's impressive. So now I know a lot of the questions are, and we can talk about how often the evals are done for Wake Forest players. But let's just jump into the offering that we have to the community, which is the pitching evaluations. So, which can be found at wakeforestpitchinglab.com, the pitching evaluation process. So it's a three-step evaluation process where you meet with the strength coach, functional movement coach, and then do the biomechanics session in the pitching lab itself. And so, Coach Seaver, if you don't mind jumping in and talking about what you look for during your screening and evals and how that fits into the picture overall.
Sure. I'm in a pretty fortunate situation as the strength coach. It's pretty safe to assume that I may be one of the few, if not the only, strength coaches who's gone through this process as a player. When I was a baseball player with the Baltimore Orioles, I went through this same sort of situation with Dr. Andrews' lab down at ASMI in Alabama. And it was very rudimentary to what it is now. There was I tell all the kids who go through that I was on a VHS tape somewhere, and most of the kids that we have now don't know what VHS means. So we didn't have the movement screens. I didn't go through the screens with the trainer. I didn't do that sort of thing. I just got markered up and filmed, and they compared my mechanics to the most elite pitchers at that time. We do it on a bigger scale where we can take the major league averages and look at where you fall in those averages, whether it's college or high school kids that come through. But it's a much better process than what I went through. And again, the first thing you're going to do is come through me with a movement screen, and we're going to look at 5 different aspects of the way your body moves. We're going to look at core control. We're going to look at how you rotate, your stride, your posture, and how your arm how you can control your arm and your arm movement. Before I send you to Jeff Strahm. One of the scouts that I just talked to, who called me about one of our current players, they have an evaluation where they look at their athletic ability of the kid they're looking at, not just his numbers on paper. So the strength conditioning part of it, the movement part of it, like Coach Walter said, how you move and your athleticism is just as important to how you throw the baseball. So again, it starts with the movement screen and starts with how you can apply force and your ability of your body to apply that force and to apply that safely. And again, as a player, I've had 2 shoulder surgeries, and our job number 1 for the pitching lab is to keep you healthy and keep players healthy and to see what their movement pattern issues are and how they can correct them moving forward.
So we take your screening information and the feedback you get from the athlete and give the athlete, and then hand them over to Coach Strahm, our arm care coach. So Strahmer, sorry, we've got a 3-month-old fan in the stands heckling the game here. But Coach Strahm, can you walk us through your process?
So again, they go see Mark first, and he takes them through his screening, and then they come see me. And really, what I'm doing for these kids is I'm looking at 2 main areas of the body: the shoulders and the hips, and that's the couple of areas that are most identified with leading to injury in baseball players. So I'll take them through range of motion testing of their shoulders. I'll take them through range of motion testing of their hips using a bubble goniometer. And then I will put them on in position to test the strength of their shoulders with a force dynamometer. And then finally, we'll do some grip testing. And we use those data points to compare them to, the averages of college and professional pitchers. We can extrapolate that down to the younger kids, which we do, and then I do a general screening in addition to the range of motion testing and the objective findings that I see. I also do a screening of the way their scapular movement, the way their shoulder blade moves when they move their arm. The way their shoulder blade moves is paramount to the health of their shoulder. If it is not working properly, then the shoulder starts to break down. The actual shoulder joint starts to break down, and the elbow can actually start breaking down because of that. It's all a chain, and if there's a link in the chain that is broken, the chain doesn't work.
Yeah, that's a good point. And then after they take so we'll get the athlete's information and feedback and screening information from Coach Strahm, then from you. We give that then over to Dr. Kristen Nicholson and her crew in the lab. And so, Kristen, can you give us a little bit about your background? And it sounds like, since we're definitely focused on the shoulder, maybe how you landed here with your dissertation research, and then, what you guys do in the lab for these young athletes.
So I got my PhD in biomechanics from the University of Delaware. And before that, I got an undergrad in mathematics from Clemson University. So I was definitely more of the calculation math side of biomechanics. But while I was at University of Delaware, I focused primarily on upper extremity research, specifically scapular mechanics, and how you can use motion capture to measure scapular mechanics. And as you heard Coach Strahm say, that's paramount to how your whole shoulder works in general. So it's a really key point to healthy baseball players. I also, all my funding came from a project with U.S. figure skating. So I had experience working with kind of high-level athletes using motion capture to model their jumps and create prediction modelings of, if they got into this position, this is how much they could spin around and potentially complete their jumps. Once I finished my PhD, I went and worked at a children's hospital in their motion capture lab, their gait lab. So we primarily did walking, but we sometimes did upper extremity assessments as well. And so then I'm from South Carolina, so I was looking for an opportunity to move back south, and I found this position, and it seemed like it had been written for me. They were looking for an upper extremity biomechanist who had both athlete experience and hospital experience, because as Coach Walter mentioned earlier, I actually worked for Wake Forest Baptist Health for the hospital, and I just operate as the Wake Forest University baseball team's biomechanist. But that kind of dual experience of working with athletes and working in a hospital setting, as well as focusing on upper extremity biomechanics, kind of led me into this role. And so in the lab, we do a whole body biomechanics assessment, but obviously for pitchers, the primary focus is the upper extremity. So after a player sees Strahm and Mark Seaver, they'll come into the lab and they'll do their typical pre-game, pre-practice warm-up, whatever that looks like for them. And once they're warm and ready to pitch, then we put retroreflective markers all over their body. And so there's about 40 markers that go on specific body landmarks, so that we're able to make a 3D model of their whole entire body. And then they'll pitch from our mound Typically, we have them pitch 4 of each of the pitches they have in their repertoire. So whether that be fastballs, breaking balls, and changeups. And then we'll analyze at least 3 of each of those pitches. And so with the 40 markers on, and then we also have force plates in the mound, we're able to calculate joint kinematics for every body joint, as well as joint kinetics, which is the forces that are exerted on each of the joints. And so we can take that information and look at their mechanics and look at their timing and look at how everything's working together to kind of interpret their pitching and where there may be room for improvement or maybe room to limit some of their forces and hopefully limit their injury chances.
So it doesn't sound like there's too many folks out there who have a biomechanics degree in upper extremity stuff, and definitely not with the clinical side and performance side. And obviously, I was excited to move back south from Delaware as well. Can you? I've heard you speak a little bit to, before we jump over to Evan, about. Seems like the high school athletes who pitched. Like, can you speak to the efficiency that you were finding in some of the high school athletes versus collegiate athletes in the mile per hour or the velocity of their pitches?
So we often get the question on whether we're trying to enhance performance or prevent injury. And I really think that those go hand in hand, and you really won't do one without the other. So I've recently started saying that the goal of the lab is to promote pitching efficiency, and efficiency being an increase in velocity with a reduction in force at the shoulder and the elbow. And so if you can gain that velocity while limiting the forces, then you're going to both improve your performance, but also limit your chances for injury. So what we've started to see a little bit is that when we look at the relationship between the shoulder forces and the elbow valgus torques and the velocity, they're pretty much linearly related in the high school kids. So the harder they throw, the higher their velocity, the more force they have on their shoulder and on their elbow. And that's just how it works. However, when you start to look at the college players and some of the minor league players, that relationship doesn't hold as strong. And so there are college and minor league players who are able to pitch with high velocities while limiting the stress on the shoulder and the elbow. And so we need to do more research to look at kind of what mechanics are actually leading to those lower elbow valgus torques and elbow right shoulder distraction forces. But it is encouraging to know that it is possible that through your mechanics, you can throw at high velocity and be a high performing pitcher while still having a healthy elbow and a healthy shoulder.
Well, that sounds like a perfect opportunity to then jump over to Evan and say, oh man, so now we've got all this information from Coach Strahm, Coach Seaver, Dr. Nicholson. How do we combine, how do you combine this information and break it down for these athletes to understand and then hopefully become a more efficient pitcher where they're increasing velocity without, at the same scale, increasing the risk to injury?
Perfect. I'm back now, right? Okay. I got fired up there. First of all, I think all the kids that come into the lab deserve the same treatment all the athletes at Wake Forest do. And behind me, you'll see a picture of the Qualis's report. You'll see the video links and stuff that the guys will get in the report that's put together by Jeff Seaver and Jeff Strahm and Mark Seaver. Sorry about that, guys. But I do believe the algorithm of throwing harder, throwing healthier, and I believe putting all these things together are going to be really big pieces for these kids. The Qualis's report that the kids will get shows you everything that Kristen just talked about. It'll show you your kinetics. It'll show you all the forces that are going through your body. You'll see all that stuff in the report from Strahm. He'll show you where you sit in those averages on all those strength pieces, and whether you need to be working on scapular strength or shoulder strength. And then you'll also see where Mark rated you in all your movement profiles. And then what we'll do is we'll get together with Coach Hendricks and look at what this guy had and ask him, say, hey, Coach, what kind of drill would you give him? And the majority of the drills that we give these guys start from the lower half up, because a lot of the things that we're seeing really deal with where the pelvis is and what kind of hip shoulder separation these young guys are getting. And we'll really try and focus on that. We'll try and prescribe drills for the lower half or the lead leg or the back leg or the pelvis, describe on how to change their arm actions, and then give them all these exercises for arm care. So these guys have a plan and they're treated like the Wake Forest athletes.
Can I give a quick story
Of course.
that might be helpful? So
Yeah.
I think one of the best examples of this lab there is our number one pitcher 2 years ago when we first opened this lab. The first time he got captured, what we learned was, he had the highest valgus stress on the team, and it was out of the normal range of stress, and where to the point where, maybe he was headed for a blowout. And what we learned was he had the slowest trunk on the team, but the fastest arm on the team. So what we were seeing with our eyes the previous year was he would hold his velocity for about 60 to 65 pitches, and then his velocity would take about a 5 to 6 mile an hour dump. And then the other thing we would see is he really couldn't locate glove side fastballs. He was all arm side. And the lab showed us that was really tied to his hips more than anything else. So through a set of corrective exercises that Jeff Strahm and Mark Seaver prescribed, over the next 2 months, our number one pitcher made the adjustments he needed to make, sped his hips up, got more hip shoulder separation, got his delivery connected, and in 2 short months had the lowest valgus stress on the team and turned himself into a top 10 round draft pick.
That's awesome. So I think that probably speaks to and answers a lot of the questions. I mean, it seems like so many questions we get on Twitter is, what do I have to do to become a better pitcher? And to answer that question is so unique to the individual. Like without the tech and everybody on the team, without the technology and these experts, I mean, some might say it's a guess to figure out what it is that you need to do to make the adjustments. And so with the experts and the tech, we're able to find those things in a day, in a few hours, versus months of guess and check through different workouts and different, trying to use different slow-mo video, and relying on that technology, which is pretty awesome. So let's jump now into the fun stuff, and some of the questions or stuff you guys want to use the lab for moving forward. Like how excited now that it seems like we're up and running. Obviously season cut short, unfortunately, but where were we looking at, John, Coach Hendricks, were you excited about the improvement your guys were making, utilizing the resources that the lab brought to the table that, you might not have had otherwise?
Absolutely. I think one of the biggest transitions we made from January of 2019 up until, October 2019, even into March of 2020, was how much the pitching lab is sort of the North Star in our constellation. Every one of our pitchers is going to go through a process of us teaching him what his qualysis report is telling us, and why we're going to make adjustments to his delivery to fit the data that it shows us with stress and performance chances. We have a strength plan that makes these guys grown men in a hurry. We've got one of the best arm care plans I've ever seen, including 2 different major league organizations I work for. We have our biomechanist whose office is next to mine, and we get a chance to break down these guys, how they're moving, how that correlates to either injury concern or performance. And then we get to sit down and we get to use the coaching part, whether it's drill work or delivery work or whatever in that regard, and we kind of help these kids figure out who they want to be. You know, if one kid's goal is, and necessary for him to be a good ACC pitcher, is to gain 4 or 5 miles an hour, we've kind of figured out how to do that, and at the same time help the elbow stress, as Dr. Nicholson said, pitching efficiency. I think one of our big goals going into this fall and in the winter is to start using the lab a little more to help a pitcher with the secondary stuff. We have some ideas, and I've got some plans and ways to collaborate with Dr. Nicholson even more. I think one of the other things we want to do is start really understanding ground force as it fits our throwing model. There's a lot of stuff out there about ground force and everything, and it doesn't necessarily fit our throwing model. And I just want us to make sure that we use data to make sure we're directing our kids in the right way. But, you know, I thought 2019 we had some talent, and we had some kids that really wanted to do well. And I thought that the difference between where we were in 12 months was exponential. You know, we were a hard-throwing ACC pitching staff that could throw strikes. And the two of those things together is going to get you success. You know, and I felt like so much of what the lab has done for us is empower our pitchers and help them to buy into the plan that we think is going to help them get the best.
Similar question, but for Coach Salento, how do you envision using the lab and the motion capture resources to improve your position players and our batters?
Yeah, sure. So first and foremost, we get to steal all the throwing information out there, right? Position players, it's crucially important that they're good throwers, almost all of them. So we're trying to steal that information first and foremost. So it's one of the greatest assets we've had. Likewise, from an offensive standpoint, it gives us a basis of comparison, and going forward, and we can make sure that our guys are truly getting better. It's not just a guess, using video and just simple analytics. We can use the data, everything from how fast they move to what their sequence is, and, you know, try and better help our guys move efficiently. Many of the tweaks that we make, you know, fall in the weight room, whether or not we're having them move differently in the weight room, or they fall in from a physical therapy standpoint, from a PT standpoint, and how they move. So much like what they do on a pitching side, we're trying to do those same things on an offensive side. Much like John just touched on, you know, one of the things we're scratching the surface on is just sheer ground force and how that plays in the swing. So we've got some portable force plates that we'll start using in that regard, and have doctored up a little bit. But going forward, you know, we're going to use the expertise in this room to continue to help our players, you know, swing the bat efficiently and stay healthy.
Awesome. And then this also plays into it a little bit, and this is also kind of getting into some of the Twitter questions or questions we had come in via Twitter about lab operations. Is, you know, when we're improving our batters, I mean, really they're going up against Joey's BP arm every day. And, you know, how does he do that? How does he throw 80 pitches a day, 100 pitches a day at 80 miles an hour? That's what we really want to know.
It's all in the diet.
It's more. First of all, it's more like 500 pitches a day. And it's
Swedish fish, a lot of Swedish fish.
It's impressive. It's just Joey's a freak of nature. That's the bottom line, freak of nature. That's just
Again, I've offered to get in the lab and be markered up, but I'm not 21 anymore. So taking my shirt off is going to have to be a private session, but I'll do it.
We're leaving the high-speed cameras on for sure. Maybe for internal use only. Maybe. Joey, can you talk a little bit how you guys have used the lab and for camps and for your Diamond Deacons and helping some of the youth athletes?
Yeah, it's awesome. I mean, great tool. Again, it's such new technology, and we're at the forefront. We want everybody to benefit. Again, obviously, our Wake Forest players need to benefit from that. But when we can extend it to the local high schools, and then even the youth at a really young age to help get them to move in the right direction. Again, the earlier, Kristen talks about this a lot too, the earlier we can start teaching this, we all know players and young people, you can mold them a little bit better when they're at a certain age. And so the sooner we can get these movements to them and have them understand this, the better off it is. And we're certainly happy to be able to, provide a good deal of numbers for kids from 9 years old all the way, to the high school and into the high school age. And it's just really fascinating to see some of those correlations kind of match up and how the success matches up as they continue to go. And you also start to see some indicators about potential, which I think is really fascinating too, and how you can make some judgments and assessments there as to what that ceiling might be in an evaluation phase, which I think is pretty unique too.
Yeah. What ages do you see come through for your camps and for the Diamond Deeks? Like, can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I think Evan could probably speak to some of that stuff also. He sees them all come in all the time, but I know that our Diamond Deek, our younger program and younger players, starts at the age of 9 and through. We don't have our 9-year-olds get marked up. I believe, Kristen, if I'm not mistaken, I think our 12-year-olds were the youngest group that we've had come through and get marked, but we've got two 12-year-old teams, a 13-year-old team, 14, and then 2 15-year-old teams also. So I think that's the ages that we've had them come through so far.
We've had as young as 10 years old come through the lab. We've even had a female lab participant. We've got one data collection on a left-handed young lady, great strike thrower. The Diamond Deacons are a big portion of the guys we have come through there. They've been very diligent in getting in there and getting the work and getting in there, seeing what working your guys are working with the PVC pipe. We've taken time to talk to their coaches and teach them how to use the arm care. And we put together special arm care stuff for the Diamond Deeks based on their practices and their games.
I mean, I know there's a question about follow-up in a little bit that came in from Twitter that we'll ask, but I do want to ask, jump in a question from Pat Hassel on Twitter. He said, what's a typical day like on the biomechanist side of things? How much interaction with the players, coaches, and biomechanists in there? And I know Coach Hendricks talked about that briefly, that, all the offices are right next to each other, but Kristen, can you speak to the biomechanist side of things for all the aspiring masters and PhD biomechanists out there that see your job and want your job and wonder who else is going to have an opening like this?
Sure. So it varies kind of from day to day, but I spend a lot of my time actually doing the motion capture collections. So putting the markers on, having them throw and collecting the data, and then processing and cleaning the data, and then creating those reports, and then putting feedback in the reports. And so ideally, I would like to spend less time doing some of that, like hands-on, putting the markers on, collecting the data, processing the data, and more of the providing the feedback, actually, sitting down with the players and talking through the results and incorporating Strahm and Seaver's information, also digging deeper into all the data that we do have and looking at the different correlations and figuring out really the best way to use this data and use this lab for the Wake players and all baseball players in general. Hopefully, as baseball biomechanics becomes more and more popular, there'll be more kind of funding opportunities that can bring in more students. And so I can pass off some of those daily tasks to students and kind of focus more on being the biomechanist for the team rather than being the technician or the data collecting person.
Yeah, and it sounds like we might have some extra help coming in. Can we talk about that at all, or how much of that can we talk about?
I don't know. One of the Major League Baseball organizations has sponsored a master's level student, and so they're going to come in and work some on data for that team, but also on whatever other baseball data that we kind of have that he can work on. And and then he'll get his master's degree on something.
Hopefully biomechanics, and then sounds like maybe there's an opportunity for him to move on to that team once he's done with school.
Definitely. I'm gonna add to that from a coach's perspective on what the biomechanist does. So for what Kristen has done for I think all of us, John, Evan, I'm sure Walt and Joey, is her background isn't specifically in baseball. So we have natural biases within the sport of baseball that we think X, Y, and Z should happen. So she's opened a lot of doors for us from a coaching perspective on a daily basis, just on how athletes move in other sports and how that can be, a positive thing in the sport of baseball. So at least for me personally, I think I speak for the group. The biomechanist position in our situation has challenged the way that we think athletes should move in the sport of baseball, and therefore made us advance individually.
Yeah, I'll add to that. I think we have the perfect storm of staff right now. We've got Kristen Nicholson, who's on the biomechanist side. We've got Mark Seaver, who's certified in on-base U and movement patterns. As John Hendricks said, we've got Jeff Strahm, who's an expert in arm care. We've got John Hendricks, who has a better feel for what an athletic and repeatable delivery looks like than anybody I know in baseball. And then we've got Evan Wise, who's kind of the go-between between everybody to pull all the information together. I think one place that a lot of labs fall short, right, is they have a biomechanist, but that biomechanist lives in a silo, and there's no collaboration between the biomechanist and the strength coach, or the biomechanist and the athletic trainer. And again, I think what we do better than anybody here at Wake Forest in our pitching lab is just that collaboration between all those disciplines.
Yeah, I've seen it in many organizations where folks too often, for better or worse, fall into a silo. And while being a specialist certainly has its advantages, some holes in communication and relaying some discovery can happen. So I know it's been pretty amazing to watch from the sidelines, all the coordination and how quickly the collaboration has scaled to improve the facility, the coaching, and the athletes. I've been having a great time watching everybody advance. Let's get another question before we run too long. Another couple questions, and this one's probably open-ended, and we've kind of answered it before, but Matt Fiorini asks, any common movement patterns with athletes who have had significant arm injuries, such as the Tommy John surgery, labrum, rotator cuff tear, compared to athletes who haven't had those injuries? Looking at more of college and pro-aged guys in particular. Kristen, is there any movement patterns that you see after an eval that immediately throw off any red flags?
Well, that question specifically is kind of difficult to answer because we don't have any real data from people before and after injury. So you don't know if the patterns you see from someone who had Tommy John surgery is a result of surgery or was something that led to the injury. That's kind of hard to answer because you don't really have the before and after. You just have the one time point. So I think there are some studies out of like ASMI where they've looked at the mechanics of a bunch of people who had Tommy John surgery. And I don't know off the top of my head what they found. But I think that the general kind of consensus is that the higher the elbow valgus torque is, the more susceptible you are going to be to that elbow injury, to needing Tommy John surgery. And so if you can alter your mechanics to reduce that elbow valgus torque, then you're putting yourself in a better position to avoid injury.
And I'll kind of piggyback off that too. It really is sort of the road that the Wake Forest pitching lab is going down. It's kind of what Dr. Nicholson alluded to with having a little more support staff so she can spend more time kind of studying these connections and correlations. There's things that we know in terms of observational learning about guys do these things and they tend to get hurt. but I won't like really speak on them now because we don't necessarily have all the data behind us. But there is things that we're starting to realize with our pitching staff. If we make these adjustments between motion captures, we've seen significant decrease in valgus stress, while the velocity may even be higher than it was in the last motion capture. But I don't think that it's Dr. Nicholson is a scientist. I think she would agree. I don't think it's like we've done enough of these studies and she's had enough time to make all the connectors to really speak on that right now. Like I look at the pitching lab as in terms of, we're trying to put a rocket into outer space and we're kind of at the top of the atmosphere now. And by next season and the next spring and all the work we're able to do over the summer and the fall and the winter, there will be a lot more answers to some of these questions going forward than there is right now in any of the motion capture labs in the whole country.
Yeah, that's really exciting. And I know everybody's on the edge of their seat. Like, to find the answers to like, what is it that's, what was it that blew out my elbow, or what was it that messed up my shoulder? What was it? Everybody wants those answers quickly, and have wanted them for probably since baseball has been around, right? And we're getting closer to being able to answer those questions, which is really exciting. And then
and just one last thing on that, Dr. Nicholson, she knows what the prototype like perfect angles are at foot strike. The data's already like, it's all there. Like that part we already know. Now the real quest is how the movement patterns got you into those angles at foot strike, and then which one of those movement patterns can you alter in order to increase health. And nobody's really got the answer on that yet, even though I think we're doing a pretty good job of it.
I love that. This question is probably more for Evan, which you have talked about a little bit, but like, how does the information from the lab, how is it presented to the outside athletes who come in for an evaluation, and how often is there follow-up?
So I'll answer the back end of that. We haven't, there is significant, first of all, we have a tremendous follow-up. We're trying to create a relationship with each kid that comes to the lab because health is at the utmost importance. Each kid's getting an email with a link to their quality report. In that quality report, you can find feedback from Dr. Nicholson. You can find all those stress numbers. You'll also be able to find a link to all the videos for all the exercises, from everything from drills like the Demon Deacons do to exercises and correctives from Jeff Strahm, our arm care coach, and Mark Seaver, our strength coach. A great collaboration in that piece. It's all right there for you in one little package. As far as customer service is involved, email, call, we'll be happy to help you.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, it's like some of these, I know we've had a lot of interest in folks wanting to sign up for evaluations, and it's just like maybe a few who haven't just like jumped in and requested a time slot. Obviously, who knows when we'll be able to open back up for the lab, but they might have been on the sidelines just unsure of what the follow-up process was like. So thanks for answering that question, and we'll definitely be able to answer that question maybe more in depth on the website. I should probably make those updates. And then I think last off is more of a performance question. So really anybody can answer this, anybody and everybody. So it's like, is there any value in using Rapsodo, TrackMan, or the radar tracking systems as a tracker of fatigue? And are there any overlays of that stuff over a force plate that show drop-offs in both?
That's an interesting question because I saw that question a week or two ago when it was presented, and I've actually asked several people that aren't involved with Wake Forest pitching. There hasn't really been any studies done with Rapsodo. It's not what the device is for, like where you're doing fatigue modeling with Rapsodo. Rapsodo is more about identifying what the ball's doing ballistically out of your hand, and you use Rapsodo in order to improve that. Ground force, absolutely. The tighter you are, the more fatigued you are, the more it affects your ability to create ground force and transfer that force into movement as you get later in the game. That's how pitchers get tired. They can't create ground force. They can't transfer the force through their delivery. I will say that we did a really interesting study that kind of came up inconclusive that I'll let Dr. Nicholson speak on a little bit, but it is sort of like shows sort of that pioneering creativity she has, where we had pitchers last year in 2019, starting pitchers come out of the game and immediately go get markered up and throw, 10 or 15 more pitches in the lab, even after they'd thrown, 80 or 90 in a game. And we used that to compare to a motion capture they'd done earlier that week, because we were trying to look and see what type of fatigue happened in a motion capture. But again, I'll let Dr. Nicholson talk more about it, because it was a really cool idea at the time.
So my thought was behind that study was that there are fatigue studies out there, but they're all done in like what they call simulated games. So they just have them throw 100 pitches and then test them again, and they call that kind of a simulated game. But there's a lot more that going into a game that you can't really simulate. The mental fatigue and the timing between innings and all that stuff is really hard to simulate. So I wanted to use our unique setup to our full advantage and pull them in right after they got done pitching and see if there was any mechanical changes. I need to do a better job of really looking back at that data and kind of seeing what the differences were from their bullpen, beginning of a bullpen a couple days before, and then that fatigue data. My initial thoughts was that every single one of them was throwing harder in terms of velocity in that actual fatigue state than they were at the beginning of their bullpen. And so whether that's because they were more warmed up, or some of the players were really angry because they had bad outings, and some of them were really excited because they had a really good outing. So potentially, that mindset played into some of the data. But I need to look closer at what mechanics changed. I know for one of the players, the coaching staff kind of looks at him and says, oh, when the Rapsodo indicates that his arm slot drops, that's when he's getting fatigued and when we need to consider pulling him out. And I did look at the data, and while it appeared that his arm slot dropped, really what happened was that his lower extremity was getting fatigued and his knees were being more flexed. And so his arm looked like it was in a lower slot, but it was really in the same slot. His legs were just fatigued and he was dropping lower in knee flexion. And so some of the things like that I think are interesting and we can look at. And that kind of points to where maybe tools like TrackMan and Rapsodo aren't the kind of gold ticket that people think they are, and they're not necessarily showing exactly what you think they are. And so by having both of the pieces of equipment, we can kind of start to look at that and see how they relate and how to best use all of the information.
That's great.
Yeah. Correct me if I'm wrong on this, but is extension still a good measurement of fatigue? Like at fatigue, you have less extension. Isn't that true or not true?
Yeah. Also, I mean, we only did like 5 guys, I think, because we were just doing the starting pitchers. But I kind of found that it was different for each guy. For each pitcher, have kind of a unique marker of fatigue. So maybe some of them, less extension means that they're getting fatigued. Some of them, it's purely a drop in ball velocity. Some of them, it's a trunk tilt gets more pronounced when they get fatigued. Some of them, apparently, it's knee flexion is more deeper flexed as they get fatigued. So I think it's kind of unique to the guy, which makes sense. Their mechanics and how their delivery is going to fatigue, some group of muscles more so than another group of muscles. And so it could very much be unique to every single pitcher.
I do think there's some use for TrackMan with fatigue. Evan Wise did a study last year, sort of in his free time as a hobby, and we noticed that some of our pitchers, their fatigue indicator was the release point on their fastball and changeup got wider. We noticed that for another guy, like his strike percentage went way down. We noticed for another pitcher, the release height changed because he was squatting on his back leg, which also made his extension shorten up. So I think TrackMan's in there. You just have to find the things that change, like from pitch 0 to 60 and then pitch 61 to 100. And then as they separate themselves, you can see the fatigue there. But
yeah, I'm not saying that it's wrong or not useful. And, some guys' arm slot appears to lower as he gets fatigued. I mean, that's still what TrackMan is telling you is his mark of fatigue. When the TrackMan data shows a reduction in arm slot, then he is fatigued. You just have to keep in mind that it might not actually be a reduction in arm slot. It might be that his knees are being more flexed.
Yeah, like the TrackMan can explain to you how he's moving different.
Right.
Is it still the
Love
prevailing
that we're
wisdom?
discovering right here, like right now. We're having a little team athlete discovery. This is great.
Is it still the prevailing wisdom that most injuries occur at fatigue?
Yeah, that because your mechanics change is kind of the prevailing thought. But then also some of the injuries are known to just be like overuse or accumulative stress injuries. And so it appears to happen at fatigue because you need kind of that repetitive level before the injury kind of happens, but not necessarily due to fatigue as much as just the repetitiveness of the stress.
Now, this is something probably off the pitching lab topic, I guess, but of course applies to fatigue. Kristen, could we do something as simple as a vertical jump on the portable force plates, whether it's between innings, and this might be something we could experiment with a fall ball situation, just testing a kid's vertical jump in between innings and seeing how that affects either his velocity or arm slot or what the kid looks like out on the mound, whether it's extension like Coach Walter said, or release height and stuff like that. See how that correlates with the data that those two modalities are presenting.
Yeah, that would be super easy to do. Another thing that would be really easy, you could do it along with the jump height, is the grip strength. You could have them squeeze.
I've done when I played, we did a study on grip strength. Obviously, we didn't have Rep Soto and TrackMan in that, but our strength coach was doing his master's degree on the relationship between velocity and grip strength, and we tested that between innings. And again, it was based off performance. If you had a good inning and you were excited about it, it might be higher. If you had a terrible inning and you were pretty depressed about it and upset about it, it might be higher because you were mad, or lower because you were upset. So it played a lot with the psyche of the individual. But obviously, again, those two metrics could play into a part of what we're looking at with TrackMan and Rep Soto.
Yep.
All right. So from that little session, I just got 3 things out of it. It sounds like they need to do more squats is what I heard. It sounds like Kristen got in their face whenever they came out of games and really told them to not throw cheese. And then in terms of injury, it's like pulling weeds. You go back and forth and up and down. And that's kind of like what pulling weeds out of the sidewalk is the equivalent to getting injured from baseball. So that, as somebody with no baseball knowledge, that's kind of what I just got out of that. So really, that I think that's going to wrap it up in terms of we've gone pretty long here. We've gone for an hour. We've answered a bunch of questions. Is there anything else anybody wants to add to the excitement of the lab, what we're looking forward to? I love some of the discovery we were already having right there. That was great.
I'll make a little plug for the lab and then I'll get out of the way. I mean, I think there's 2 things that make Wake Forest Pitching Lab unique to any other lab in the world. One is we're the first one that it's a college baseball lab at our facility, part of our baseball field, that its number one job is to help the Wake Forest baseball win more baseball games, pitch better, to win more games, to win championships, to have postseasons. All the other pitching labs are kind of built either like at training facilities where they're kind of in the arms race to try to throw 100, or they're built at, physical therapy facilities where it's about not getting injured. And we're kind of the one that blends everything together and brings in like the injury prevention, the trying to throw harder and healthier. And then, we have a team ERA. Like, we have to get hitters out or the lab hasn't served its purpose. So we're the first one to do that. And there's no manual you can read that says how to be a college pitching coach using a motion capture lab. So we're really sort of at the forefront of trying to figure out how to do this all the time. And I think we're doing a good job. And my goal is we look back 2 or 3 years from now and we kind of laugh at ourselves because we've learned so much and our process is so much better and it helps our pitchers. And then I think probably secondly, the thing that makes the lab so unique is even once other schools kind of catch up with us and have their own lab, unless they make a pretty significant investment and have their own biomechanist, in-house who works specifically with the baseball program, and then they have the ability we have with Evan Wise and Jeff Strahm and Mark Seaver, they're going to be outsourcing so much of what it actually takes to make this thing work. So I don't know. I mean, I think it's, we're at the forefront of it and we're unique and across any other pitch lab there is. And
Yeah, I just saw a tweet came out from Baseball America that they polled 90 head college coaches. I'm not sure the Wake Forest baseball received the most votes for any ACC for best player development facility, highlighted by the pitching labs. That's pretty exciting.
Yeah, how we weren't number one is beyond me, quite honestly. But number 4 is not bad. I think I'll give you one soundbite, Jefferson. If you're a young pitcher and you want to be elite, this is the best $300 you'll ever spend. Period.
Amen.
Awesome. Yeah, we can just that's
I
pretty
hope
much
every
gonna,
travel ball coach in the country hears you say that.
There you have it, folks. Thank you so much for checking out what the Wake Forest baseball coaches, biomechanists, and lab coordinators, strength coach, and arm care coach had to say about our Wake Forest pitching lab, which is attached to the baseball stadium and is our indoor bullpen. If you are a young athlete out there, even a minor leaguer or a pro athlete out there looking to get some more insight on your movement patterns, strengths, weaknesses, and just anything and everything that has to do with your performance on the mound, we'd love to be able to help you out. And so visit us at wakeforestpitchinglab.com to see when the schedule will be open. Of course, you can sign up for our newsletter to find out when the lab will be opening again, which is hopefully soon. And we'd love to help you out, see you in, and see what we can do for you. Have a great day, and go Deeks.